You have occupied many different roles in your life. Did you ever see yourself as Elle magazine cover girl?
To be asked, to do it and, finding out I was doing it with a couple of my friends, it was such a fun experience.
You have 3 women's hockey players on the cover of a fashion magazine, but we also have a Black woman and an Indigenous woman. Do you kind of measure the impact of that?
Representation matters, and I can't say that enough. To show the young boys and girls that they can achieve anything that they set their mind to, and to have that exposure and show them that they too can one day even become a face of a magazine.
What role can sport play in inspiring confidence and leadership in a kid, but an Indigenous kid specifically?
With hockey, I found that when I started going on the ice and just focusing on playing hockey, it always made me feel like, normal. Most importantly, it kept me active. And, I can't stress that enough, especially, going back to, my community. Being active, helps your mental health and your body as well.
You have been very open about your journey, and part of your journey includes confronting racism. What do you say to a kid who says, I want to do this, but when I do this, they call me names?
To be an Indigenous person, to be First Nations person, it helps you develop a thick skin. You're getting called all these names, and all you can do is, focus on yourself. And that's kind of my main message is, focus on yourself, focus on your goals, and, do anything you can to achieve them.
To me, it's just unfathomable that it's 2021 and we're having these conversations, and, you have a young niece you're gonna have to have this conversation with. How can that be?
It's a topic of conversation, especially with, the residential schools and all the news that's coming up from that. It all comes down to education and educating people and, showing them that, the lasting effects of residential school.
You posted on your Instagram that it's important that we have these conversations beyond Orange Shirt Day. We have to have this conversation all the time.
I do hear a lot of, why don't you just get over it? I do read it, on social media of, comments of people not, being empathetic towards the situation, and they don't realize it because you haven't gone through it. I was wanting to write a post, but I didn't know what to say, and I remember that night that I wrote it, I was like bawling my eyes out writing this post. And I have a 7-year-old niece, a 5-year-old nephew, and a 4-year-old nephew. Back then, all the kids were that age, and the youngest kid that went to a residential school was 3 years old. So it's very, emotional, and you don't realize how much it actually affects you until you hear the news of, the bodies being discovered. Knowing that, I have so many relatives that went through the residential school system, and, my grandparents, and I know that my grandpa, faced so much abuse from, physical and mental and sexual abuse, and it's just hearing those stories, it's gut-wrenching. It affects me so much, and my family so much. So I do believe in the First Nations people, Indigenous people, that they are we are strong and resilient people. It's a dark part of our history for sure, and it needs to be known. It needs to be taught in schools, and it all comes down to, again, education.
How can we be better allies?
I think it's just, sharing the stories and, being empathetic towards the situation.
As your ascent in hockey continues, so does your voice. How seriously do you take your position as a role model?
Asked me this a few years ago. I didn't take it that seriously because I didn't realize the impact that I had. But following the Olympics and being able to share my story and be comfortable with sharing my story was very important. It was very inspiring for me even to be able to get kids out of their shell and get them to open up to me, and just be so excited to see me, and showing them that they too can achieve their goals. I'm very proud of who I am, and I'm very proud of where I come from. When I was younger and facing the racial taunts on the ice and being called names when I'm crossing the street, I could choose to take the path of being, embarrassed of who I am and just quiet and not having a voice in this. But I want it known out there that, the First Nation, Indigenous people, it's awesome. I love that I'm Indigenous. I love that I'm First Nation.